Comrades, the fundamental paradox of the February Revolution. It was made in Petrograd on the initiative of masses of workers, among the Petrograd working class. Its success was guaranteed by the defection from the regime of the large, dominantly peasant soldier garrison. Therefore, you can say, in a certain sense, not only the workers, but all those representatives of the peasantry in Petrograd, against their own will, of course, made the revolution. Who inherited the power? I noted yesterday, Mr. Sarita continued to talk to the Romans simply about Petrograd. Once the regime had gone down in Petrograd, totally rotten of it, that not a finger was lifted as the outside in the regime finished. But a few days later, who inherits the power? Well, we had the 5 days, new Petrograd Soviets created on the model of 1905, but this time with a very, very important, necessary difference. That is to say, it contained delegates not only of workers on the basis of 1+10, but also of the regiments, also of the army. Now that, let us be quite clear, indispensable. There is no possibility of the regime having the revolution actually surviving except on the basis of their support of their activities. But it wasn't the peasants, or even the representatives of the peasants, who assumed the government power. In election, as Trotsky said, rich lords, big industrialists, lawyers, doctors, etc. It was the bourgeoisie. That very Russian bourgeoisie, we discussed yesterday, so fantastically weak, incapable of carrying out its struggle against Tsar, incapable of finding its Cromwell, its Robespierre, even its George Washington. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, at the end of the 5 days to be precise, he finds himself in power. And incidentally, as we know from the memoirs, absolutely astonished at and terrified about the prospect. It came about because of the action of the Petrograd Soviets. Now, Trotsky asks rhetorically, and he says, who made the February Revolution? And he replies, well, after careful investigation, we can answer definitely. Conscious and tempered workers, educated, brought up by the party of Lenin. And that is true. The militants, the working class militants, were, not necessarily in the Bolshevik party, but under the influence of those ideas. They were the Reds. We have to have very important qualifications, have to wavering up the soldiers, they wouldn't have won, nevertheless that's it. And he continues. This leadership proved sufficient for victory in the insurrection. It was not adequate to transfer the leadership of the revolution to the workers' vanguard. Why not? Well, there are 3 reasons. The first reason is the obvious one. It's the nature, the composition of the soldiers. There's an interesting thing, this is Trotsky's main issue. There's another little work he wrote not long ago, at the time actually, more or less, in which he says, look, what sort of delegates were elected by the Reds? Remember, social conscription, wartime, and so on and so forth. I have the wrong page, don't worry, I've done the right one. He says, essentially, middle-class Democrats. That's where we are. Why then? The regiment has to send representatives to the revolutionary bodies before its political anyway corresponding to the level of rapidity. Who could they send? Naturally, only semi-intellectuals who are to be handed their midst on a certain minimum at least of political knowledge and were capable of uttering it. In this way, the will of the awakening army, as a result of the awakening army, the lower middle class actually found themselves suddenly raised to a position of enormous influence. Doctors, engineers, lawyers, journalists, in 3 more days, led a humdrum private life, and no claim of any sort of political influence came overnight. Representatives of battalions, regiments, brigades, divisions, corps, and the whole army. And that, of course, is the case. The When he talks about self-living trade experience, you must remember that that's not the term soldiers were optionally illiterate. Some of them, sign their name on a wedding certificate was optionally illiterate. And so very obviously, the people who came to the fore, who were elected, you speak for us, you've got a red oak, etc., were basically, Trotsky said, lower middle class aircraft. Of course he asked themselves, in some cases, they considered themselves, but they were petty boys of aircraft. Then greatly outweighed the opposition of the Petrograd Soviet, which is the one that missed the censorship of the workers. They've had to use some statistics on the man, active statistics from the Russian sources. The basis of the empire, yes, gave a great advantage to the soldiers, the peasants in uniform, broadening that is what they were. And they would take a free company of soldiers, and against one delegate for each 1,000 workers. Originally, the companies in question had been known as swollen reserve regiments. That is to say, we have about 200 or 200 plus men in company, right? Or maybe a bit more. But soon, the company, regardless of was sending one delegate to the Soviets. As a result, the 150,000 troops in and around Petrograd had double representation of the 450,000 workers in the city. That is the first explanation, right? The first thing, and it is important. Not entirely accidental. Because of course, but also the workers themselves. Not having to elect Bolshevik delegates. Some did, any did, but not all. Why not? We go back to what was said here. Because of any real revolution, it's a huge masses of people who previously have no effective participation in the political process, right? Who don't believe they can change the world and so on. Suddenly radicalized, suddenly thrown in activity. Who then do they relate to? To what is regarded as the left, getting left, the rest, they've been persecuted under the Tsar, and so on and so forth. And first and foremost, even in the case of many of workers, the revolutionaries are coming to the moment. But there is a third left in the theories of the Marxist party, to Marxism. Fundamentally, not numerically very large, at any stage throughout 1917 in Petrograd. They had no real organisation before the revolution, and all they improvised on things never amounted to anything. But it's a very interesting book called The Mensheviks in 1917, put out by some American academic who is quite very ethical. They think they were a nice fellow, but like these nasty Bolsheviks. Nevertheless, he is confounded, he's all dead children. They're all going to never amounted to very much. What then was their importance? Through the more SR delegates elected by workers in the SR centre of peasant parties in their minority. Bolsheviks found themselves in a minority, additionally not a very big minority. What was the importance of the Mensheviks? It was this. The SR, Trotsky called it the Great Zero. Great because it was the support, the immediate support of huge masses. What did people know about it? They were the heirs of the Narodniks, of the people who had murdered Alexander III, of the back to the land business, anti-Semitism. They stood, their platform said, for the land to those who till it, the land to the peasants, right? Against the Tsar, against Tsarism, against monarchy, and so on and so forth. Much more than that. This big zero, of course, on that basis, in a revolutionary situation, attracted enormous support. It also attracted, and this again is a characteristic of the second stage of any real revolutionary process, the support of what's called dubious elements. People who, actually, Lenin, this remark, people who, before the 5 days, would have denounced so downly anyone who they even suspected of being SR would join the SR party. Army officers, middle grade autocrats, if they're thinking to do security, I am going to left, most of the left, they could have raised up. And not only that, but also to control the process, to limit the process, the Mensheviks provided a theoretical justification for the setting up of a pronouncing the sound name, a wealthy landlord and substantial shareholder in a number of enterprises, including the Swedish editing firm. This eminently respectable figure, surrounded by businessmen, liberal landlords, this was the impetus, was the found power. Because the mentioning argument went, and because the mentioning has substance matter, in fact, they are the big zero, without any coherent notion at all of their own, accepted it. The revolution in Russia is a bourgeois revolution, and therefore the bourgeoisie should take power. We have to force the bourgeoisie to take power. The Soviets, which effectively controlled Petrograd, and bodies like it were very, very soon to control virtually all the towns in Russia. The Soviets, having the real power, insisted that these elements were willing to come forward should constitute a provisional government. Provisional because of the second part of the theory. Of course, in time there will be elections for a constituent assembly, which will decide on the constitution, select a professions and so on and so forth. But not yet, comrades. There's a war on, time's up, we must wait. Not yet a provisional government of people being pushed into power by the talking about by the SRS. Some of the theoretical basis, but no further. This is not the case, contrary to some of the put out in the Stalinist period. The Bolsheviks in Petrograd a hard, firm, clear, and principled position against Bolsheviks. They did no such thing. Few days after the regime cracked, the first legal Pravda appeared again. It had been legal from 1912, remember, until 1940. And when it came out, tremendous enthusiasm, and citing the memoirs of prominent work of in Petrograd. We've got our faith on the great weapon which remember had the Civil War emptied for very considerable influence of wide layers of work. And he said, when we saw the first copy, we were appalled. We were appalled. Why? Because he said, in effect, welcome to the provisional government. Now we have democracy. The word last love, not a word about the war. Remember, the party is supposed to be firmly anti-war. So, as a matter of fact, were of the prominent SRs and the Mensheviks. They have, some of them, supported Simovats, Kinsal, I don't want to go into details of this, they have supported the broad anti-war, centrist anti-war government. Worse than that, the first Pravda was brought out, a rather improvised job, by a few members of the Petrograd District Committee. The best known of whom, I think he survived a long time, the great survivor was a man called Molotov. Not a stupid at the time, not a very prominent Bolshevik leader. But one of the things the revolution did, of course, was they had no choice. The provisional had no choice. Let out all legal prisoners. And two much more senior Bolsheviks returned Siberia to Petrograd. They didn't remember it's still in Switzerland all this time. They were Kamenev and Stalin. They were full members of the Central Committee. They were the only full members of the Central Committee in Russia. Under their direction, paper and party line shifted sharply to the right. Not only, I don't say uncritical support, of course they criticised. They said the provisional government must do more. The provisional government must really organise the solution. It's chaotic, etc. But they supported eventually their voluntary initiative. And again on the key question of war. By example. Here we have, I take this from the second volume of part of an article written by Kamenev, who was senior at the start. You know, he's been on the Central Committee longer and so on and so forth. Peasants and workers and when an army stands against an army, the most absurd policy would be to propose one to lay down its arms and go home. This is not a policy of peace, but a policy of slavery. A Bolshevik, the free people must reject with indignation. No, free people will stand firmly at their posts, will reply, fight for blood and for shell. This is unavoidable. Now, there's a problem with all that. You know, I mean, you thought it was reasonable. You know, there's not a problem with that. What have the Bolsheviks said? Matter of fact, the left Mensheviks said, when the French Socialist Party voted for war credits and supported the war in 1914. Come on, there was no time in France. It was a bourgeois democratic republic. But what they had moved to position. And the position they denounced on war, right? Basically, they had adopted. Now, this was, I could quote the very worst quotation, but I don't want to go on that. This central point, the Bolshevik Party too, was pulled in the general euphoria behind the provisional government. Not without opposition. And this is important. And the Duel district, main working class district in Petrograd, the committee passed an indignant resolution to protest denouncing Charliette and Stalin and so on and so forth. All sorts of people were unhappy on the line without being able to clearly stand up and fight it. Nevertheless, that was the line. And why was it the line? Well, you know, it's true. Impossible theory. Impossible. What, after all, was the position, the perspective, in the strategic sense of the Bolshevik Party? I don't mean the perspective in the sense of the return, you know, what's the prospects for the next 12 months, 18 months, and so on. But what is the strategic of it? It is the achievements of what Lenin called, rather clumsy phrase, the presentation of the proletariat necessity. This I must explain. There were three positions, you see, basically among classes. The Robbins entertained the illusion of many SRs entertained the illusion of growth from peasant backwards into communism, like that. So, amongst Marxists, the most serious people, there were three positions. One, the Menshevik couldn't drop it. These of the development of productive forces in Russia. One is the corresponding political regime. It is medieval. Therefore, the nature of the coming revolution is revolution. It is inclined, etc., etc. And therefore, the bourgeoisie must come to power, and if they are we, meanwhile, in qualifications, they will soon to drop. Of course, as a class party, a working class party, do not enter the government. We remain in opposition, yes? But we support the bourgeoisie in taking power. But that's the mental position. What was the Bolshevik position? Anyhow, it is nothing, this is not a quotation, I'm paraphrasing, summarising these positions quickly. It is nonsense to suppose that the Russian bourgeoisie is capable of a struggle for power. The liberals are struggling, miserable, and so on. They will not produce their Cromwell. Why not? They are too late. Too late not in the general historical sense that, if you like, they've seen the film played before and they don't like the finale, but in the sense that the development of the working class, a small but dynamic sector of highly modern industry, has created circumstances in which they are afraid of any general social upheaval. Add to that the fact that they have many ties with land ownership, after studying in reforms, purchase of land and so on. They have a vested interest, at least not in the status quo on the land, at least in preventing any vested upheaval which would destroy property rights. Therefore they won't do it. Okay? Now he's in a bit of a problem, isn't he? Bourgeois revolution. Lenin accepted that beyond question. Bourgeois revolution. Democratic means bourgeois, a democratic state. No question. Bourgeoisie won't find what's the solution. Hence this note that the peasantry and the working class, that Trotsky called it an algebraic formula, which is a convenient way of saying, well, we'll see how it works out, you know, the quantities fit in. But basically, they will take power rather than resist in order to do what? Not establish the Soviet Union, because the Russian state, Russian society, economy is not sufficiently advanced for that to be a viable option. Not to establish that internationally a Jacobin type dictatorship. He was thinking of the convention, and so on and so forth, right? Sweep away all the aspects of the old regime, level down destroy every vestige of feudal privilege, the established church, and so on and so forth, in order to do what? In order to level the ground for the development of capitalism. I repeat, of capitalism. That had been Lenin's position, and it did, so far as Bolsheviks in Petrograd knew, it was still Lenin's position. There was a third position, which was Trotsky's, which followed the arguments, yes, bourgeois revolution. No, bourgeois will never make it, right, thus far with Lenin. But 3, the democratic dictatorship is a utopia. Is a utopia to achieve the momentum to overthrow the regime. Right, great momentum, massive radicalisation. It is absurd to expect that you establish this working class from peasant regime, which then lays the groundwork for capitalism and in due course advocates for bourgeois party. That's what you see. It is utopia. The way out of the old past is to look internationally. You have to put your money on the revolution in Europe, on the revolution outside. So you have to see the Russian Revolution, the coming Russian Revolution, like this 1905, in actual perspective. Okay. The Bolsheviks too then, provisional government set up, and then real power resting now to the Soviets, as far as the Czechs exercise power, and Soviets elsewhere. Formal power in the hands of the government. This is the famous dual power. The power of the government depends almost entirely on them being able to persuade the Soviet elites, the Soviet party, first of all, mentioned SRs, to execute, to persuade people to execute their discipline in the army. The gendarmerie are making quick exit. You know, the Second Revolution wasn't public. There was 1,700 deaths. Most of the workers, most of the rest members of the gendarmerie and other unfortunate police officers that happened to get caught up in the shooting, and the rest, the gendarmerie, the workers we see. Not me, not me. I've been Hungary in 56, 40 76. Me, not me, never had anything to do with that. And therefore, the means of coercion simply didn't exist. Then, in April, I know this is to dramatise. It's not true that everyone in the Bolshevik party accepted this one. It's not even true, all Mensheviks actually voted out. But broadly it was accepted. Then, in April 1917, the famous sea train, Lenin, in calculation on the part of the German General Staff, allowed to return to Russia. Merely say, quote, actually, the impact of it is when he appears. Remember then, the very well known revolution. The president of the Petrograd Soviet and SR come to the Finland station. The president of the Soviet from an SR appears with a large bouquet and an appropriate speech of welcome. That is to say, of being the general. Then he says, this is the apricot tree, saying one of the barons of the room. And then, the Petrograd man, the Soviet man, pronounced the following speech of welcome. But not only the city, but also the children. Comrades, in the name of the Petrograd Soviet, of the whole revolutionary democracy, we welcome you to Russia. But we think the principal task of revolutionary democracy now is to dispense the revolution to being chosen either within or from without. But this goal requires not disunity, but the closing of the democratic ranks. We hope you will pursue these goals. Then he turns his back, gets rid of the bouquet, walks out to the initial crowd, this little waiting room, and makes the following speech. This is happening on Thursday. This is what he heard. Dear comrades, soldiers, sailors, workers, I have retreated your victorious Russian Revolution. I you as the vanguard of the worldwide proletarian army. The piratical imperialist war is the beginning of a civil war throughout Europe. It is not distant when at the call of our communist elected sector the peoples will turn their arms against their own capitalist exploits. The worldwide socialist revolution is dawning. The Russian Revolution, accompanied by you, has prepared the way and opened a new epoch. Long live the world socialist revolution. Now, we used to reference to that sort from Malice, you know, we were a few years ago. Then we thought given a name. Here's what we teach for this class. Now can be provided in order to shift the line of Bolshevik power. There has to be a very, very sharp internal struggle. That struggle was, in fact, won by Lenin. Not as some people would have you believe, particularly American academics, because he had at his disposal some things that were so means that were disposal, not any magical means of changing his mind. But because he had central argument about the April thesis, down with the provisional government, the workers' party must take power for Soviet power, not necessarily Bolshevik power, but for the Soviets to take power, and so on. This is the orientation. End the war now. And to say, never mind the never land considered the self, and to the peasant now, not in the indefinite future after possibly its constituent assembly, in the cities and so on and so forth. Fundamental shift is very surprising that there was massive. That resistance was always common because at the end of the day, the working class militants who constituted the core of the Bolshevik Petrograd really had been sinking. So they were unhappy, and they were unhappy with the previous life. They were openly opposed it. Therefore, yes, thank God, is this articulate and current leader who is even more senior than, service on the Senate than the Congress now, yet, who says exactly what I think. Took time, took a period, intense meetings and so on, but the party was shifting. That's the first thing. Notice the point about party conservatism here. It had two routes. One route is the obvious one, from which nobody at all is immune. The euphoria of the immediate revolutionary process. There will be some comrades here who can remember Portugal in 73. We've read about Jackson, flowers and barrels and rifles, everything loves one another, we all embrace the streets and so on and so on. All marvelous. Actually, of course, the class relationships are temporal little things, it's complicated and so on. That is one. The other four was the theoretical witness. Theoretical witness of Bolshevism in the first instance. Now then, having shifted the party, we have a problem. Lenin had raised the slogan, down with the provisional government. But the Bolsheviks are a minority. No question about it. The Petrograd Soviet, the most important, they had about 1/5 of the delegates at this stage, about 1/5. The other 4/5 support, not all, but by and large support the perspective of the provisional government. Necessary, therefore, as Lenin said, you can't do it by the coup. You can't bypass these people. They have to be either convinced or replaced by the process of periodic re-election. There has to be a period of patient activation amongst the working class, taking up the concrete issues and so on and so forth. Now, this was the perspective of set, not the immediate perspective of a figure of power. Now, strategically, it was very important in Lenin's view to get the situation where the bourgeois government was got shut off and replaced by a government basing itself on the Soviets on the clear understanding that any such government at that time would have been overwhelmingly Menshevik and SR dominated. SR dominated in numbers, Menshevik dominated in brains. No question about it. Why then? Why then do it? For two reasons. First of all, practically demonstrate. Two, ask the workers and peasants. In reality, the bourgeois government is a shadow. It will make no difference whatsoever to the bread ration, to whether the train's wrong, to anything. It disappears tomorrow. Real power left on the Soviets. Secondly, put to the test these people. This is the famous shoveling power in all the great puzzle to this. But whatever you think about that position in general terms, I know some comrades are unhappy about it, in many ways, and Labour Party and so on, in a revolutionary period like this, absolutely no question it was right. You see, so long as the fiction of the provisional government was maintained, the SR leaders, their Bolshevik theoreticians, could make the sort of speech that greeted Lenin to say, revolutionary democracy, etc., etc., etc. Right? As a division of labour. The provisional government, when nasty things have to be done, the provisional government is pushed into doing it by the leaders of the Soviet Party. But they themselves, providing the essential support, at the same time able to employ left-wing rhetoric and say, you know, when the Constituent Assembly comes, or Congress is going to go when the Constituent Assembly comes, but not yet. We can't have it yet. Therefore, to make a break. Briefly, they made a series of attempts, the most important one to shift things, to take a political initiative. The most important initiative in June, first one, was an armed demonstration. An armed demonstration. They calculated we're in a minority. Nevertheless, you know, we can pull out some regiments and we can pull out quite a few workers. It's got to be armed, so the other side doesn't dare to start shifting. We'll have an armed demonstration around what slogan? Slogan? The leaders of the Soviet majority must take power. Down with the provisional government. The leaders of the Soviet majority must take power down with the provisional government. The provisional government prohibited the demonstration by arrangement of the Soviet leaders. Then agonizing calculation. We see this 2 or 3 times again. Oh my God, can we go? 2 or 3 times again. Very quick. Calculation. Can we do it? How many soldiers can they count on? I mean, this is the essential calculation. Actually, they can count on more than we can. Probably. We're not certain. You're never certain until it's tested, but we can't risk it. They backed down. They called off the demonstration. You can imagine what some of the ultra lefts who floated around the British political scene would say about it. But they were able. They were losing productivity. They were able to serve that because the leaders of the Soviets in Petrograd tried to stay, decided, a few days later, July the 1st, they would have their own demonstration. It would, of course, be entirely around their slogans. You know, support the provisional government, for peace, negotiation, and so on and so forth. All the usual slogans. And then they found they have got a problem. Not these terms of this, will they? I absolutely don't. In time, very closely, but I can't resist this one. Then it's all this demonstration to dish the Bolsheviks. And what did they find? What did they find? What did they find? They found. What they found, however, was a sea of banners, various factories of various regiments saying what? Down with the provisional government. The slogans were overwhelmingly Bolshevik slogans. Now, this demonstration has been called by the other side. In total, Trotsky said, actually, we are stronger than we thought we were. And so we were in Petrograd. There is no question. A shift. And here again, party conservatism equals revolutionary party. Very difficult to make the calculations from day to day. You know? They have thought a few days earlier to adventure to carry out this under our own banner. Then, right, we'll sneak under their banner and try to pinch it with our slogans, overwhelming this attempt. Right, then on there, a process of radicalisation going forward, not something certain. Here we have to come to the difference between Petrograd and the provinces. A little later, early in July, a second, and this time much bigger, armed demonstration was organised basically by the Bolsheviks. Government, this time, confronted it, tried to confront it, to limit it. There was fighting. The thing went on for several days. Bolsheviks were ineffective. They had called. Lenin was quite sure. Trotsky was quite sure. It was necessary to push, but only to push so far. Why? No doubt. They could have taken power in Petrograd at that time. But Petrograd is not broken. The process of development, which I have described, you know, the throwing into the control of the Soviets by the big zeros, this is in Petrograd. Moscow is more backward. Kiev is incomparably more backward. And when you come to some bloody village, I mean, they hardly woke up to February yet. In other words, the whole process of development of the capital, centrally important, during the 5 days, it was sufficient to have an insurrection in the capital to push over the Tsar. The Tsarist regime was utterly rotten. But come on, to push over the SRs, that's a very different thing. They are not utterly rotten in the sense that they enjoy the support of millions. Most of those millions having rifles and organised in military units. Therefore, calculation, take power in Petrograd means a Paris commune in the, not in the good sense, but in the sense that the rest will slaughter us. The proletariat will be decapitated, therefore retreat. And they did. Not without internal friction, because the Bolsheviks had a leftist wing as well. Many of the leftist Bolsheviks regarded the calling off, urging, cooling down, back off and so on as treason. Rather than being homogeneous and everyone falling into line at every stage of the internal conflict. The retreat was right, but you have to pay for such things. They've had a success, they put the fear of God, actually the provisional government itself didn't last very much longer. It was replaced by a coalition, and eventually the SRs were interested. They put the fear of God into their opponents. And they haven't, they're wounded, if you like, but they haven't killed most dangerously. Consequently, there was a massive reaction. The government sought, above all, to get reliable troops, what they hoped were reliable troops into Petrograd, They sought to disarm the Bolsheviks. They carried out a campaign of slander. Trotsky history calls it the month of the great slander. It said, Lenin is a German agent, Trotsky is a German agent, and he's a Jew as well, did you know that? The whole thing, the Bolsheviks are working consciously for the victory of Germany. He was arrested, he tells us the charge. Conspiring to make an insurrection in the interest of the whole Soviet government. That's, so on and so forth. Lenin had to flee. Fled to Finland. Had to go into hiding. The Bolsheviks were shrunk back to their really firm bases. Their interest was not destroyed in the major metalworking factories. They were too well rooted there. But the slander, the torrent, the reaction, and then, not only that, the middle classes, numerous in the capitals as they are in this capital, raised their heads. And these prosperous, fat dentists and doctors and lawyers, who a few weeks before had been waving their red SR cards, now came out in their true colours, anti-revolutionary colours, and they did not discriminate. The Bolsheviks afterwards to be on the tail, that's obvious. But this was all Reds. All Reds. The Soviets and so on away with this nonsense. Membership of the right, military conspiracy, government finding torn. By this time, Kerensky was effectively in control of the government. Prince Rock had wisely sold his properties and retired to Sweden, where, as far as I know, he lived a long and happy life. Kerensky, a second-rate provincial lawyer, Trotsky describes him as, is in control of the SRs and the Bolsheviks support him. Torn. On the one hand, he had, if you like, they had unleashed this campaign of reaction, this torrent of slander. They had encouraged the forces of reaction to raise their heads. They were themselves conspiring with reactionary generals, in particular Kornilov, the man who headed the insurrection at the end of August. But then at the last minute, they began to get cold. It's suddenly dawned that actually, if Kornilov came to power, and the plans were being made, supposedly reliable troops mobilized, brought to Petrograd, smash the Bolsheviks, plans to go in it, and he's going to shoot us too. Consequently, they were paralyzed, they were incapable of pursuing any consistent policy. In these circumstances, the Bolshevik party was able to raise its head. And yet another tactical problem. I promise you it's the last one, but it's an important one. Lenin came out of the Bolshevik Central Committee. Effectively, it was Lenin. They were scattered, some in prison, some in exile, out in hiding and so on and so forth. Came out with this position. All out against Kornilov. All the armed units we can mobilize. All workers. Arm the workers. agitate amongst the regiments. The enemy is Kornilov. Smash Kornilov. Kornilov will destroy the revolution if you don't. Mind you, yes, this is important. In doing this, which is very Bolshevik said, how the hell can we support Kerensky? The man's driven you into exile. He'll have you executed if you get captured. Many of our leaders are in prison. He said, in doing this, we are not supporting Kerensky, but we are fighting, we find ourselves fighting on the same side. The main enemy at this stage is Kornilov. And because the government was so big, because the Soviet parties, majority parties, were themselves divided, actually, some of them agreed to collaborate, arms were distributed, the sections of the Petrograd working class were armed again, and Kornilov was defeated. He was not defeated in a pitched battle, by the way. Resolute resistance and the arming of the workers caused his own troops to waver, and then from wavering, to say, well, actually, we'd rather go home. They deserted. I mean, literally, deserted in large numbers. That fundamental change in the situation leads to the immediate prelude to the October Revolution, which we were pleased to hear. I'm not going to talk about tonight. That's comparison. The immediate prelude. One essential thing further was necessary. I have said that the Soviets, or rather their executive committees, were dominated throughout this period by SRs and Mensheviks for reasons we have discussed. But those executives had been elected some time ago. Oh, not so very long ago. I think it was a 4 or 5 year electoral process, only a couple of months, rather, 3 months. That's an epoch. You know, during the actual process of revolution, they no longer represented the ranks, and consequently a fight for free elections, for fresh elections for Soviet delegates, centrally informed was carried on. First Petrograd was taken. Bolsheviks got a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. Then Moscow. Then, I think the third one was Kharkov. A whole series of cities. And once the process had been set in train, it proved irresistible. I don't mean to say that in out-of-the-way places, backward and so on and so forth, the Menshevik SR majority didn't continue to hold on. It did till well after the October Revolution in some places. But in the decisive centres, the Bolsheviks won control of the Soviets. Which then, Lenin argued, this poses the question of power. Actually, there were disagreements between Lenin and Trotsky about how to do it. Leave those aside. The fact that we have got the Soviets, they argue, the Soviet majority now proves that our line represents the will of the majority of the working class. Therefore, and not the majority of the working class represents essentially the will of the peasantry, around the slogan of land to the peasants. Therefore, stop the Constituent Assembly, which they keep promising us and putting off into the Netherland. We must aim at the insurrection. That, comrades, produced the second of the great crises in the Bolshevik Party in 1917. There were 3 in all, we shall discuss that tomorrow.